guest today is Trevor Daley. He's a pro superbike racer, founder and owner of One Speed Inc. He's got a great story, and he certainly has a reputation for being a little bit of a wild man and living life at 110%. You're saying the only podcasts you've ever actually watched as opposed to listened to are porn star podcasts?
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of makes sense with the visuals, right? But yeah.
That's good. Thanks for coming on, though.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How did your season go this year?
It was pretty good. It was I had 5 podiums in 9 national pro races and ended up third in the championship. So
Good.
Definitely was good on paper. Unless you're number one, you're always wanting a bit more and disappointed with anything but first, right? But made some steps forward, kind of closed the gap. The last few years, there's been a bit of a differential, say from first, second place back to third or fourth in pace, and definitely kind of closed that up, kind of cut it in half. So definitely more in the race for the win, and hopefully can take another step forward for next year, and really look forward to it.
That's good. So since Kenny, so I had Kenny on, and then I got all the motorcycle guys are like, hey, get more motorcycle guys on, and then we connected, and I was like, okay, that'll please those guys.
Yeah.
So, but like all the racing guys, I want to start with what was your first exposure to motorsports or racing or whatever it was for you, kind of motorized vehicles?
Yeah, well, like a lot of people who kind of continue in it, you're in it for life kind of thing, right? Like I think I was probably 4 or 5 first time I got on a kitty cat snowmobile. Or
you had a kitty cat?
We still have it.
Me too.
71 kitty cat.
Oh, 71. Oh no, I've got
the first one. It's got the kind of leopard print seat with the black with the purple details.
Yours is way more desirable than mine. I think I've got a 90 or 91 or something.
Yeah. My I've got a couple older brothers and a younger sister, and both my older brothers have kids, so they're rocking that around. But yeah, I kind of started on that and was fortunate. Grew up somewhat in the country, so we had a couple acres and it backed onto the Credit River Valley. So that couple acres.
So you grew up in the country in Mississauga?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, at the time it was the country.
Yeah, I
know.
know.
It's now it's definitely not. But that area is a heritage area. So kind of mid 1800s homes, apple orchards, strawberry fields across the street, stuff like that, right? So it was pretty awesome. Like I said, being able to go at the backyard and either ride in the backyard, or there are other kids on the street who had quads and dirt bikes, and kind of grew up doing that. And then transitioned, got a go-kart for Christmas, I think in 95 or 96.
And that was your, like, why? Was your dad into racing? Was that, I assume it was your dad who bought it?
Yeah. My dad owned an auto shop, retired a few years back, but over 50 years in the industry. Got my brothers and I a go-kart and got us one for 3 of us.
Of course, yeah.
That was going to cause some fights, and yeah, definitely like in the automotive industry, the motorsport industry is right alongside of it, right? So, that one go-kart turned into 3 pretty quick, and started at Waterloo Regional Kart Club.
Same.
WRKC at Bingham's Park.
Yep.
Yeah, so started there Saturday mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I had to be out of there by 3. I think that's why we went there.
Yeah, they needed to let people into the wave park, right?
Yeah.
Into the pool. But yeah, I remember lots of early mornings. Tom Green show was on at like 5 on the Comedy Network.
Okay.
So as a little kid waking up watching Tom Green and then getting in the van and driving out there and obviously started as something fun. And then really quickly for me, was something I really enjoyed, and not going to say at age 9 or 10 it was something I knew was going to be a future, but
you were winning races though, like
well they're like that club you had they had their Oktoberfest, right?
Yeah, the big one.
Class 1, A, B, C, and D in some of the classes, right?
Yep.
Like there's hundreds of karts entering, right? So
D main and road course go-kart racing.
Yeah, I think I got a couple plaques from B feature wins or something from Oktoberfest, but did relatively well pretty quick, and unfortunately wasn't something my brothers were as passionate about or as again, not that you're hardcore as a 9-year-old or whatnot, but, you know, I kind of stayed with it, and they kind of did it more as a hobby and kind of got out of it. And then as that kind of progressed, and then moving forward in the pack kind of thing, started, you know, going to Sutton, going to Goodwood, and then kind of, I think, 4 years full-time at WRKC, started doing OKRA, which was pre-Ron Fellows.
Yep. That was the all of Ontario kind of deal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a similar series, or it was the same series, essentially, just different name. And, so going to more tracks, you know, racing with different guys. And, you know, WRKC was a little, not secluded, but a little stuck in their rules. You know, you didn't run headers, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so some...
You didn't run a nose cone.
No.
For the longest time.
No, people, you know, it's the only place you get away with like a slack cart or something out of the state with no side pods. I remember just bars.
Yep, totally.
And
like up until like it was too late to be running those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was too late the day that they, you know, were put on the cart kind of thing. But in comparison to where it went, right? But safety-wise, you think about it, it's pretty gnarly looking back. But there was always it was always pushing that 3 o'clock limit, because there's, you know, how many red flags was there going to be that day, right?
True. So, how many guys hit the bridge?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I don't know if I was there anytime anyone hit the bridge, but yeah, you think about it, you think about, racing you do now, and it's, you know, a bridge that's 6 feet off the ground. It's pretty gnarly to think about, but I know I caused a red flag or two, but
sure.
I got a couple scars from it. I think
so how did the karting progress for you? Like, your brothers weren't into it. Was it you and your dad going to the track, and then, you know, now you're running the regional stuff, and hey, I'm pretty good at this, I want to keep going? Because eventually you did, other than going to Europe, you did kind of all you could do in karting in North America.
To a certain extent, yeah. And like as things progressed, and I you know, kind of moved to the front of the pack, and you know, had some success in the Ron Fellows series, and in the, you know, the provincial series, kind of at the front of that. You know, went in the next route, you know, more speed in the 2-stroke stuff, and growing up riding bikes in the backyard or whatever, you know, sitting in a shifter cart was super natural. And I don't know how many years I'd been in at that point when I drove an 80 for the first time. Obviously, I would have been a junior, so 14 or 15 years old.
And that was probably, and maybe I'm misspeaking because I wasn't, you know, I was probably 5 or 7 or something when during that time, but that was like the pinnacle of shifter kart racing in North America. That time. That
was kind of just as it was really getting big, or had just gotten big. Like SCUSA, Superkarts USA, like that series was massive. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, some of those grids were huge, and it didn't matter, like, you know, the Ron Fellows series or OKRA, there, you know, there was 25 guys in 80 and you know, probably the same in 125. And then, you go to WK or SCUSA race, like that was kind of pre-stars of karting or whatnot.
Yep.
And it's like, you know, the Super Nats, you know, is their kind of big race that they still do. You know, I think I remember going down before it was a street race, and it was at Xplex. It was a track, I think, owned by Brian Herta that was just out of Vegas. But,
okay.
It was insane, like how big it was. And you know, we were talking our Speed Channel, Speed Vision, it's like there was kart racing on like worldwide TV, like you know, not at 2 a.m, like, you know, primetime stuff kind of thing, right? And similar to like they had it in Europe with Champions of the Future, which, like, you know, that's a lot of people's introduction to Lewis Hamilton would have been through that, right? And I remember getting that, I was going to say DVD, but it would have been a VHS at the time, getting that for Christmas or something and watching it. But yes, did 1 year at 80, and then I moved into senior when I was actually had to get, I guess, permission or exemption to do the Super Nats, and that was my first 125 senior race.
Okay.
And
big one.
Yeah. Just jumped pretty into the deep end there. And I remember at the time I was still pretty small, and you know, they're 125 cc making almost 50 wheel horsepower, and this is like, you know, somewhat spec dirt bike motor.
Yeah.
You know, it was before they transitioned into the kart specific.
Yep.
Shifter kart stuff. And I remember going down the straightaway, and the top of the rad was taller than my helmet. Like, you know, it was pretty gnarly experience. But and actually, you know, fast forward a bunch of years, Larry Pagram, you know, big bike guy.
Okay.
In AMA and Race World Superbike, whatnot. And, well, he was doing this race and was lined up beside me.
Really?
And it was like, it was a gnarly race in the sense where it was the first time that you had minimal practice. You had, say, 2 practice sessions and then qualifying. And then you ran 3 heat races to set your grid for like a pre-final. And then that set your grid for the final. So it was, you know, 4 or 5 days at the track, you know, in comparison to, you know, like I said, registration's at 7 a.m. and you're home by 3:30.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I think that kind of, you know, is similar to a lot of things I've done. It was kind of jump into the deep end and sink or swim, right? And you know, I was really fortunate, again, being young, getting into it, and I guess going back to, you know, where it started with my brothers, it's, you know, watching my dad break a recoil trying to start the kart, or tires fall off. And, I learned at a pretty young age, it's like, well, if I want things to go right, I need to kind of take things in my own hands. And
sure.
And, you know, as things kind of progressed, you know, I worked on my own karts, and
because no one cares more than you, like, especially as like a 12-year-old kid or a 14-year-old kid. Like, it's your whole life. Like, your summers are consumed by thinking about go-karting.
Yeah.
And like, if you know, if shit doesn't go right, like, it's on you.
Oh yeah. You
sure.
Definitely, you know, at that age, you still cry in public, right?
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
You know, now I just go behind a curtain, but to do it. But yeah, so it's, you know, it's devastating when you're a kid, when you don't finish, or something falls off or breaks or whatever, right? So like I said, yeah, like you know,
what was your biggest success in karting there, or what you know, what was the catalyst, or was there a moment where you're like, hey, I'm a racer, like I want to be a racer, I want to be in this industry?
Well, I think my biggest success was probably one of my actual last races, probably one of the last times I actually drove a kart, and I won the North American Championships, and which is a bit of a funny story, because I wasn't actually supposed to be doing that race. I was supposed to be there working, because that's what I was saying, like, you know, or what I was getting to is that, you know, through starting to work on karts myself, I you know, was kind of multifaceted in that I could race it and but also understand it and make changes and do stuff to be faster. And then that kind of grew into, you know, my first high school job working on first kart out of Guelph, a karting team, and then, you know, all through high school and out of that for a bunch of years I worked in race. So yeah, it was Stars. That's when Stars of Karting, you know, was kind of the big thing. And it was their final championship race. It was supposed to be at Fontana in California. There was a bunch of fires, you know, so there's a bunch of smoke in the area. So they moved it to a track. I think it was like Palm Springs. It was like an hour away, say.
Yep.
Moran Raceway, I think it was called. And James Hinchcliffe, obviously a big name, IndyCar driver and local to us, right, from Oakville. So like some races, you know, I would in one series I'd race against James.
Yep.
And then in some of the races, the Stars of Karting, I was his mechanic and his tuner.
Okay.
So I think I think it was mono, but something like that. Long story short, James was sick. Okay. And wasn't gonna come. And you know, Tony Van Treska there, he's like, "Oh, hey, your helmet, your gear's here, you race." And I won the North American Championships. And it was funny because again, as much as I had raced in other series, I had never raced in Stars of Karting. So everyone's like, "Aren't you the mechanic?"
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, what the heck are you doing, right? And then I end up like, you know, winning the race.
And was this what was this, like a shifter kart or a Rotax?
I think this is the Rotax class.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of like the catalyst that I think got me. Again, that was kind of the end of the karting, but kind of got me in the door for some of the car racing stuff, or where it went from there. But yeah, like I guess where I kind of knew, you know, I had some speed was probably in the 80s stuff, because there were some guys who had been doing it a bunch of years. Marco DeLeo, there's the Twizzle brothers, And a lot of these guys had raced SCUSA in its earlier years, and to kind of jump into that kart and win races like again at that provincial level really quickly against some of these really experienced guys, kind of made me realize that I had a spot there on the grid
right
at the front. But
so you win as the mechanic.
Yeah.
You go out and you win is the final race of the season.
Yeah.
And like what did everyone say? Like what the heck?
Yeah. Like I said, it was pretty surreal because I think like I said, there was qualifying in some heat races, and I think in the heat race I didn't have the pace. I was finished second, I think, but like there was a clear winner. And yeah, like I said, kind of went to the drawing board and made some changes. Like it was definitely a bit of altitude that, obviously two-stroke stuff, jetting's super important, and stuff West Coast or at altitude versus what we're doing in Ontario here, or even some of the Florida series is a lot different, right? So kind of made some changes to that, some setup changes, and dialed it in. And
so where did that get you? Because ultimately I know you did the Formula BMW Series.
Yeah.
So was that like a ticket to that, or did someone just notice you?
In a way, yeah. Like I said, that was kind of I guess the catalyst that got my foot in the door for that. So that winter, I had approached AIM Autosport because they were kind of one of the staples in the Formula Ford Championship. Not only as a team, but they actually built their own cars too. And, the Formula Ford 1600, Formula V, Formula Ford, those are kind of your stepping stones for years, right? And so I kind of approached them about doing a test or getting some seat time in the car.
And explain for people who don't know what AIM Autosport is.
Yeah, so AIM Autosport, definitely in the, Canadian racing scene, North American, but as a Canadian team at that level, there's not too many. So they ran Formula cars, they ran prototype cars and endurance racing. They ran the Ferrari factory Grand Am or IMSA GT effort.
Yep.
When the GTR came out with Nissan ran that, and again, smaller team, but really successful, and obviously had some really talented and skilled engineers. Again, the Formula Ford stuff to work on the cars, but also to design and build the stuff in house is pretty surreal, right? But yeah, so went there, having that race win and some success in my pocket, and they said, well, hey, there's this thing in Valencia, Spain, in a few months, maybe go over there, get some, seat time, see if you can, get your racing license or whatnot, look into it. So, that was Formula BMW. So that would have been 2003. And, applied to go over to this school and what was a shootout, a competition essentially. And then found out there's only 24 people from North America that they took. So James Hinchcliffe was one, Graham Rahal, Al Unser Jr. the third, and then Jeff Siegel, Daytona 24-hour winner. Some pretty big names when I started thinking about it there, and I got selected as one of the 24. So like I said, I think that kind of came off of some recent success high in the karting scene, and fly over there to Valencia and do the 2-day school, and I forget who like the lead instructor was, but he was one of BMW's like top touring car races. I think he held actually the Nürburgring record for.
Oh, geez.
I want to say Jörg Mueller, but
I wouldn't know.
Anyways, and it was pretty surreal. We were there a day or two after the Formula One car for that year, which would have been, I think, with Williams BMW, the year that they had that split nose.
Yep.
That wasn't around for too many races before they realized that wasn't good. But anyway, so they had released that car a couple days earlier and done all the press stuff. So first laps out, seeing all these lockup marks going in the turns of, knowing it from that, like the washroom or the change area for your suit, Ralph Schumacher, Montoya's name on it was pretty crazy. And at that point I had never driven a race car Never been on a track, never, sat in one.
Yeah.
Sat in many as a kid, right? But, I think just maybe had my G1.
Yeah.
Might have had my full
15 or 16, yeah.
Yeah, 16. And anyway, so, fast forward, day 3 is the shootout day, right? So one guy on track at once. I think we did 2 laps or 3 laps, and next guy out.
So it's just all based on how fast you are.
Yeah. Well, so that's kind of what we thought, right? So,
and sorry to interrupt you. How did it work? Did they fund this whole deal? Did Formula BMW fund this whole deal, or did everyone have to bring a little bit of money?
Yeah, I think you paid your expenses to go over and whatnot. I think for what it was really reasonable, especially because, like I said, in the end you got your FIA International C license, which is the 3rd highest license you can hold, right?
Right.
Or at the time it was, right? I think now there's like a super license or something. But anyways, yeah. So it was an affordable way to get your foot in the door. And like I said, I was just going there for the seat time, for the experience, and then to get a license to potentially come back and do something at a much lower level. And I was the only person who spun out
during your lap.
During the laps. And I was like, no, that's it. I'm done. Fast forward maybe a month, and I got a call, and sure enough, I was selected. And I think they selected four out of the 24 of us, or maybe it was 6 or whatnot.
For North America.
For North America, yeah. So 2004 would have been the first year of that championship. And, for people who don't know, the Formula BMW Series, had been in Europe, had been in Asia. I think there's a Spanish and a Great Britain Series. So first year to North America. And essentially it was a small Formula 1 car.
Yeah.
Carbon tub car. It actually, BMW motorcycle engine in it. And spec. So it was a driver's series. You can't, you could only change so much. All the parts were spec, so it kind of came down to the driver, right? And it was very early. Now it's a known common thing that, like, Formula 1 drivers like came up through a system. They didn't just become, were picked up by a team.
Yeah.
The previous year, it's like that team or potentially another team had bred them, from a very young age. So this was essentially BMW's in for that. And I don't know if it was the same year as me, but Sebastian Vettel came up through the same thing. A lot of drivers did through the Formula BMW program.
Right.
Either as like a BMW supported driver, or like that was kind of their first taste in a Formula car, right? So
you spun out, but you were still selected.
Yeah.
So you must have had fast practice times, or they liked you or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we realized at the time. I don't think any of us did. And I think we all definitely went out, partying that night. And, after a few drinks, and, one drink when you're that young is going to hit you. But I think we all kind of looked over like, oh crap, all the judges are at the same place. And, anyway, so I don't think we realized, but I think the entire 3 days we were kind of being judged on our personalities, on how we, interpreted the information and what they were teaching us, and then how we kind of progressed. And like I said, for me, looking back at it, was maybe an advantage that I didn't have any experience. Because, I wasn't going to go beat some of these guys who'd already done Skip Barber. Yeah. Had been in a car racing for years. Like, I wasn't going to beat them all out lap time, but maybe that potential I showed was a little bit higher, because maybe when it came to lap time, I wasn't all that far off, but hey, this is my second, third day in a car, right? So,
right.
So yeah, like I said, we didn't necessarily know it, but it was a much bigger picture. And again, like that's, racing, marketing is a big part of that. So it's not.
So you weren't throwing up at the after party. Is what you're saying?
I was at the airport the next day, but at least I didn't forget my passport. One of the other dudes forgot his passport, and that was, I'm sure that would have been horrible. But anyway, so yeah, like I said, it was pretty awesome. Got it, won the scholarship, which got us, some support. It definitely wasn't. I want to say the scholarship was probably about 15% of what the expense would be to run the full season. So, which was a bit of an uphill battle. It all was, but again, being the first year that it came to North America, it wasn't something anyone knew about. So, trying to get people on board, and again, being Canadian, right? We did have one Canadian race, so it was pretty sweet. We'd race essentially the Sunday morning of a Formula One race. So we raced at Montreal GP, Indianapolis GP, and then I think it was 7 Champ Car races.
Okay.
Still winners, Champ Car, IndyCar separate.
Yeah. So you guys were always the support race for either a Formula One race or an IndyCar race.
Yeah. So
cool.
Pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
And actually the Formula One weekends, again, having this BMW affiliation, we got to go into the BMW pit, Formula One pit, and sit in the car. And I remember holding the steering wheel, and one of the guys joking that it was worth twice what the Formula car I was driving was worth.
Yeah.
And actually the team I drove for still has the placard, or above the garages has your name and, Canadian flag or whatever. And I know the Indianapolis when the guys got up there and undid it and took it with them, kind of thing. So
that's good.
So yeah, just a pretty unreal experience in terms of how it went for me personally. Was a tough learning experience. Didn't have the financials to run the entire year, so only did the first half of the season.
Yeah,
you're close to it. But like I said, as a whole was an awesome experience as a driver. But the whole program had a behind the scenes, mechanical engineering side to it. Like there was schooling every day, or like a class that, having, being the scholarship driver I was allowed to go to. And, you learned about stuff like, okay, when you add more wing, this is, the progression as you build speed, how much drag. And then, you got to take into account what your gearbox, because, shifter kart racing, 6-speed gearbox. In the Formula BMW, 6-speed gearbox, but you could actually go in and change not just your overall drive ratio, but hey, I want third gear to be a little bit longer.
Yep.
So I don't need a shift in the middle of turn. I can just change third gear, stuff like that. And, you know what I mean? So it kind of opened, was another step forward in opening my eyes to, the big picture, right? It's not just, some people are massively naturally talented that they can get in and turn a fast lap.
Totally.
But there's another side of skill where it's like you can get in something that's really not great and then develop it, and then you get to that fast lap in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now you're kind of, are you down in the dumps or that you didn't get to run the whole season, or was that never like, hey, I'm going to be a Formula One driver?
I don't know if I had a shining light, like a dream, like this is the next step or something like that. It was definitely disappointing, because I think the situation as a whole, like obviously it was disappointing not finishing out the year, but some of that was some crashes, some budget, getting eaten up in that, which learning in the racing industry is not cheap.
No.
And, it's the team that I did the start of the series with kind of took a bit of a gamble on me too. So I gave those guys a lot of work, which anyways, like I said, it was a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, the next step up, Indy Lights or Formula Atlantic at the time was $500,000, and then a cheap IndyCar seat was $1 million. So
and probably a lot more today.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure, right? And
so it was kind of like that's probably unattainable.
Well, yeah, it was like we'll see where this goes. You never know. Like things could have clicked a bit more, and it gone a different way. And again, some of those guys who I mentioned earlier, like I said, made it to the top. Won IndyCar races. One really, a bunch of them, still racing at that level, right? So, but yeah, like not only are you up against it, trying to race, top guys, but then there's also like I said, the behind the scenes stuff, with the financials to it too, right? That you're up against. So it's like you're working in a bunch of ways, and it's kind of never ending, right? But
yeah. So what happened after that? You went to AIM. You got the job.
Yeah, well, so I wasn't racing next year.
Yeah.
And, some of the guys I knew from karting, Daniel Morad, another guy who we raced karts with, who came up through the car stuff and did really well. I think he was racing with them in the Formula BMW Series the next year. So AIM ended up, got a BMW car and was one of the teams. They had multiple programs. They had the BMW Series, or the car. They had their Formula 4. They had Formula Renault, which was, very similar to the BMW, bit more power, a bit bigger car. And then, like I said, their touring stuff. So I got a call from them, saying, hey, we heard you're not racing, but we know you're very mechanically inclined and hands-on, and obviously have kind of, had your head in this game for a long time, and, are you interested in giving us a hand on the Star Mazda program, which was another open-wheel car, Mazda rotary. That's, that was kind of the transition into the other side of the industry and working in it. And, with that said, I was still racing at the time. I bought a touring car, an SCCA car, Nissan NX2000 that kind of brought up and ran some race at Mosport in Shannonville, and blew a lot of stuff up. And but it was fun because I was learning, and being able to take what I was learning and still do what I loved.
Right.
And then kind of progressed through the ranks at AIM and to their prototype program after a year. I think it was a pretty quick rise there. And like I said, we were the only Canadian team running in the Grand Am Series, and Daytona 24-hour. I think there were 14 races. One Canadian race, one in Mexico City, and 12 in the U.S. So, and for every race you did, outside the street courses, you pretty much tested at almost every track. Or obviously Daytona, we did a 24-hour there, but we also did a shorter race there. And we probably tested Daytona 3-4 times preseason. So it was, I wasn't in the car driving, but like my life turned full racing.
Right.
If it already wasn't, it was
full on, big schedule.
Yeah, big schedule. And, we were a smaller team, so, you're wearing multiple hats. Like I was, part of the team in the pit crew, or like for the, pit stops.
Yeah.
And then, but also like I was the front end mechanic. I was the guy repairing all the carbon body work, doing all the welding in the shop. So it was an awesome experience looking back at it, and to be in my late teens and get that opportunity. And again, like I said earlier, kind of sink or swim, right? Like, you can't leave something loose. There's no margin for error. You can't do a crappy weld. You know what I mean? Like, you don't build the car to go 24 hours in 1 minute. You build it to go forever and hit other cars and take some shit and keep going, right? So, definitely, again, to do that at a young age and work with some amazing people. Amazing in the sense that, like I said, they're super knowledgeable, but gave me that opportunity. And, whether I asked the right questions or they just gave me the answers before I asked them, like, we're very open to
teaching you.
Yeah.
Right.
Which fast forward a bunch of years from that, is really set me up for being able to kind of do anything moving forward from there.
Right. Now the next, maybe I'm kind of jumbling the timeline a little bit, but, the next kind of, well, you were right around that time, you were my GoKart mechanic.
Yeah.
For a season.
Yeah.
At the first kart deal. And that was that right after you worked at AIM?
No, so that would have been before, because, so I did the BMW in 2004, and I still worked at First Kart then.
Okay.
And I think that season I worked with, it was either that season or the year after, I worked with Gustavo Yakman, who was a Colombian driver.
Yeah.
Same thing, won Indy Lights races, almost made an IndyCar, won a bunch of endurance stuff, just a character.
Okay.
I'm not sure, did you ever meet Gustavo?
I don't think so.
He was ruthless. Like, kids were scared of him. I'm not shitting you. Like, kids would come over on the grid, stars of karting, top level in North America stuff, and be like, hey, just don't hit me off. Or it's like, hey, just hit me once and I'll let you by, kind of thing. Like I say ruthless, but or aggressive, but I don't know, did what he had to do. And probably some people didn't like him, but, I don't, looking back at it, it's like, no, it's like this guy won, we won, all the championships we could have won.
He got it done.
He got it done. Yeah, I guess that's exactly. He got it done. And yeah, so I think I worked with him at the same time I was part of the BMW program, and then I think it was probably the next year. We worked together in the Ron Fellows with the Rotax stuff.
Yeah, it was a season to forget for me, but
yeah, I remember it being a bit tough. But I think that was your first year in the Rotax.
Yeah, those were hard to drive. They were different than driving a 4-stroke.
I remember you being relatively small at the time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I was like,
so I remember
13 or 14. Yeah.
Well, I just remember having like a ton of lead on the cart to make weight, which was always a pain in the dick to lift up onto the stand. But
so then, but what I was getting at was, how did you suddenly make, from my perspective, you suddenly make this jump to a couple years later, motorcycles?
Yeah, because it's
fill in the gap there.
It's a bit of turning left or turning right from where I was at, right?
Yeah.
But, well, like I said, I did the AIM thing for a bunch of years, and I think I was 23, 24 at the time, and like I said, it's a life commitment. You're 3 weeks of every month on the road.
Right.
Maybe you have 1 month of downtime, between the end of the season and getting into testing for the next season. And kind of that off season really isn't much downtime because you're doing a massive overhaul on the car. Again, prepping it for, your biggest race of the year, 24 hours. And it was the type of thing. I was pretty young. I had a Ducati. I had a first generation Hummer. I had all this cool shit. Did I have any friends to go ride my bike with? Did I know anyone from high school? Was I close? I didn't. I was like, I've got all this stuff. But what's it worth if I don't have the life, or like can't enjoy it?
Right.
And I kind of looked at it that like I'm at the age where I could do something different, and still young enough to get in kind of on the ground floor of something different and make something of it, rather than like, hey, essentially like where I'm at, like my step up from here is I could be the crew chief. And it's like crew chief of a winning prototype car is a big deal.
Yep.
But do I want to wait another 10 years to be there? Another 10 years of workless after every session? Like it was just, it kind of became monotonous to a certain extent. And I was like, well, I decided to kind of walk away from it, I guess. And yeah, like I said, kind of growing up, riding bikes, it was kind of full circle back to that. And I got an opportunity to work at a custom bike shop in Toronto area kind of thing. And they weren't so much like a maintenance shop as much as they were a custom shop, and actually were like a registered frame manufacturer. So
wow.
had a CNC, so like, and a clientele to match kind of thing, in the sense where, there's a lot of components on a race car. A bike is a lot simpler per se, a lot more compact. There's a lot less stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're that cheap, when you're hand building stuff,
sure,
right? or CNC stuff. So it was, again, an awesome opportunity.
You mean clientele, like where guys are willing to spend the dough to build custom bikes?
One of the first bikes I worked on, the price tag was $280,000.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Nothing was like all the components, like all the bolts, all the spokes for the wheels, custom made wheels. Nothing was chrome plated. It was 24 karat gold plated. And it couldn't be 18 karat, the guy was adamant, right? It was a very particular customer, but
wow.
Had a look he wanted, and yeah, so you're building stuff from scratch. And again, coming from the prototype car where there's so much fabrication, it was an awesome transition because it was similar work but had an artistic side to it.
Right.
Which is something that I always kind of felt I had too, right? Like a lot of racing stuff is 45s or 90s, right? It's got a purpose, and where a lot of the custom side, it's curves, there's interpretation, personal interpretation, that
sure, some
that
flair
comes into it too, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah.
So you were drawn to that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was a whole nother kind of element, a whole nother challenge, right? Because, there's, that's one of the cool things of the custom industry is there's function, and then there's that, meeting a look also, right? Like it's multifaceted, and you know, a lot of the chopper stuff is probably more look versus function.
Sure.
You know, which like now with having my own shop and I try and kind of combine the two, which you know, and again, you know, you're bringing a racing performance aspect into that custom side to it. Like, you know, it looks cool, but it also, you know, you made it look badass, but it rides better too, or it brakes better, it's faster. It's like win-win kind of thing.
Right. So you start working at this chop shop or custom shop in Toronto. When, you know, now you're immersed in bikes and bike culture. When are you like, okay, I'm a racer, I want to race bikes?
Well, so like I said, I'd had a Ducati and totally bought it on a whim. Never thought about having a street bike, never ridden a street bike, and was up at a buddy's place. And this was, again, kind of late 2000s, bit of a recession. And they started a business going down to auctions in Michigan or in the States and buying bank repoed sleds or bikes or whatever. And, you know, I was up at their place and they opened the trailer like, oh, you got to see what we got. You know, and there's, I don't know, 15 bikes in there and brand new CBR 600 RR. I'm like, oh, gorgeous bike. I remember it was like blue and silver. Like, oh, no, that's a piece of shit. Keep going. I'm like, what? And then anyway, so I climb over a couple more bikes or a couple sleds, and there's this Ducati 749R sitting there. And they started it up, and I was sold. So I think I, like, walked out of the trailer, called my dad. Hey, do you think we could get motorcycle insurance on your policy? Yeah, I think I can. Okay. Like, literally drove to the bank later that day. Yeah. Got the money and bought the bike. And so had that when I worked at AIM. Started working at a bike shop. And again, custom stuff, primarily Harley-based, right? Or in a big way. So, you know, I wasn't sure when I went there for my first day of work, do I park in the back? Like, or can the, you know, being riding a sport bike kind of thing, right? Like, anyway, so yeah, I worked there and coincidentally in the same plaza, per se, there was another bike shop, which was sport bikes and race bikes. And, you know, so these guys like, oh, come do a track day, bring your bike, come try a track day. And I went there and brought my bike and, you know, taped off all the lights, whatever, got it ready for the track day. And shortly before this at the custom shop, they had thrown like this massive customer appreciation party. Okay. AKA let's break stuff and drink kind of thing. Okay. Anyway, but it was huge. Like there was a Ferrari Enzo, one of their clients had, that was like on display in the shop, and my Ducati was roped in with it. And you know, so it was popular with the girls giving out the drinks. But anyway, so somewhere it got...
Or so you thought anyways.
Well, no, maybe stories to not get into, but maybe say that for another podcast, but more the ones that we open the show with. Yeah. That of that nature. But anyway, so the bike ended up getting rolled out and there was a 4-way burnout. And it was these 3 choppers, then me and like I remember the shopper was like, I'm gonna do a better burnout than you. And I'm like, dude, I'm already like in 6th gear, like tapped, like smoking the tire off kind of thing. Anyways, next time I rode the bike is this track day. Obviously put new tires on it. Get ready. I get there. Sure enough, did I not like tweak a shift fork or something like that? So it's, you know, Shannonville Fabby track, so the back track, and, you know, coming out of a turn. So, like, again, never having ridden a bike on a track, obviously had been on that track, you know, a bunch over the years, right? So that side of it wasn't new. The thing's skipping out a gear kind of thing. Anyways, the guys who run the track, they're like, hey, we got a bike. You want to try it? Like, you look pretty comfortable. You know, you can take it out and try it, right? So at least you're not sitting out the rest of the day. So I take this bike out and, you know, do a few laps and start getting some pace, start getting a good feel for it. And, you know, come in and the guy's like, well, okay, so I'm going to put a lap timer on the bike and we're going to see what you can do. But remember, it's not your bike. Yeah. You know, he made that very clear because actually the shop owner, the whole drive to the track, you know, went with the custom shop owner and he was riding one of this guy's track bikes too. And the whole time he's giving me just take it easy. You got nothing to prove. This is, you know, blah, 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 blah. So we go out and I'm behind him and he's behind another guy leading us around. You know, there's a hairpin onto the back straight there. I want to say first lap, We come out of the hairpin. Does he not whack the throttle? The bike cleared the wall. He high-sided it. It was just like, it was the perfect, like, slow clap moment. It's like, take some of your own advice.
Yeah.
Anyway, so needless to say, they were a little leery of, like, telling me to go out and go fast on a bike that wasn't mine after their second bike, was in a pile kind of thing, sitting behind the wall. But anyway, so I did a few laps. They looked at lap times and said, this is kind of, beginner, like, in regional racing, there's kind of 3 levels. Where in the national stuff, there's 2. So there's a novice, amateur, and then pro. And then, like I said, in the national stuff, there's amateur and pro. So they're like, well, you're pretty quick novice times. Like, if you ever want to do a race and, get your bike fixed or whatever, and, we'd be happy to come out and, do a race with you and kind of show you the ins and outs. So, a couple months later, get some race body work on it and get the gearbox fixed and show up to the last race event at Shannonville that year. And again, Ducati, it's 749, so twin cylinder, essentially comparable to, a Japanese inline 4-cylinder 600cc. But because it's not a 600cc and the classes are 600 and superbike, they made me run it in superbike.
Right.
And actually, so they started me in 600 and I qualified pole.
Right.
And it's like, they're like, who's this guy, right? So,
who's this guy not on a 600?
Yeah, exactly. So I remember the series owner came over and he's like, the guy ran it. He's like, hey, we don't want people to complain. Like, do you mind, like, racing? So it's the same guys. Like, a novice or an amateur, a lot of the guys run both classes on a 600 because you get more seat time. And when it comes down to it, at an amateur level, there's not too many guys rocking a super bike for what it's worth, right? Using all that power. But so they bumped me up into the super bike and started me dead last. And I ended up almost winning the race. And I think, there's probably close to 20 guys. So it was pretty good first race.
No doubt.
Yeah.
You must have been like, shit's easy.
Well, it was fun. That's for sure. And a couple weeks later, I did another race. So that was the final race for that series out of Shannonville. Yep. There's another series that at the time ran out of Cayuga. And, so their final race of the year was a couple of weeks later. And the way that their series was run is you didn't start your race by a qualifying time that you set in a session. It was started by points. So obviously starting last, right? Yeah. And I think like this series was huge. It still is. It's called SOAR now. They run out of the Grand Bend track now. Yep. Anyway, so they've got like really big grids, really, really high membership. And so let's just say there's 40 guys. And, you have a, say, 6-lap heat race and a 12-lap final. So I start dead last, say 40th. I think the second last lap, I remember coming onto the front straight, and there's some dude standing on the wall with a cowboy hat, like waving it. And every lap that went by, more people on the wall. I end up passing the guy, winning the heat race. I'm like, sounds like I'm talking myself to be a hero, but I think I went from like 40th to first.
So spectacular.
Yeah. So it's pretty gnarly. I high-sided myself to the moon in the feature, but for those 6 laps, it was pretty great. Yeah. And yeah, that's like, and like I said, it was somewhat new for the 2-wheel stuff, but
But you'd been on a motocross bike, like
and just racing's. It was kind of this is the place for me because, like I was saying earlier with the car stuff, you're kind of up against a wall with other behind the scenes stuff. And,
totally.
If you want to talk like the car stuff, you're a smaller part of the equation per se. Like your car prep, your setup and stuff. Maybe it's 60-40, 60 driver, 40 car, something like that. Obviously, different cars, different series is different thing. In the bikes, especially at like a beginner or an amateur level, you're 95%.
Because you're showing up with a bike out of the showroom. Well, essentially,
you're just what you do physically.
I see.
And the decisions you make, not only because you're not just strapped into a seat and you're moving your hands and feet or whatnot. Like, there's obviously a lot more to it than that. But driving a car, but like you're physically forcing the bike to do stuff, and you're like I said, you're just such a larger equation of the end result and the speed, right? So it was kind of like, man, I'm not up against the politics. I'm not up against some of the, financial challenges. Like, I can get on a bike and do well really quick because me as a racer is a like I said, a bigger part of that equation, right? So, back down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Now we're going racing.
Yeah. Now we're going racing. Sold the Hummer, I had a Skyline. I sold that. Actually, I had I think 61 Chev Deluxe at the time, something like that. It had some nice stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm going bike racing. Sold that, sold all that stuff. And I didn't realize at the time, it's like, there's bike racing and then there's bike racing on a Ducati.
Right.
And, the price tag and difficulty of the latter is a bit bigger.
Sure.
They don't call it the Ferrari of motorcycles for no reason.
Right.
And
so you were going to race this Ducati.
Yeah, well, it's what I had, right?
Yeah.
It's what I had. It was, seemed like it was going to be, a good fit or whatnot. So kind of spent that winter, did a bunch of work to it and showed back up, at the first Shannonville race, moved up to amateur. And, you had, again, talking to Kenny a couple weeks ago there, like Kenny was a couple years into pro, but I remember, parking beside him because he was, we grew up not racing each other in karts, but like.
Yeah, another karting guy.
Yeah, karting guy. And it's like, okay, never saw him again. Well, years later, fast forward, come to the bike track, this is what he's doing. And hey, he's like the guy to beat in pro now, right? So it was pretty cool. And his dad and him kind of, gave me some pointers and showed me the ropes a little bit. And, showed up that first race, qualified pole and amateur. Same thing. Running away with the race, 5 seconds ahead, just riding, 110%. Come out of one of the turns, send myself to the moon on the gas, kind of thing. High side, run over in the grass, pick the bike back up, foot peg gone, windshield smashed, pick it back up, keep going. And finish right. And people are like, you can't do that. Like, and like, well, why not? And they're like, well, people don't do that in road racing. Like, you think it, like, again, yeah, growing up as a kid, going to the dirt bike track or riding dirt bikes, you fall over, you pick it up, you keep going. It's like, you dust it off, no big deal, right? And like, no, but in road racing, you don't do that. You walk away, kind of thing, right? And so I think I had some people like a little spun kind of early, and then I think at the end of that weekend, the guy who ran the Canadian National Series was there, and he's like, "Oh, are you going to come to the opening round in Quebec?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to, but like, there's." My bike didn't necessarily fit into the rules. And like I was saying earlier, like, it wasn't a 600, it wasn't a super bike.
Right.
So he's like, well, you're going to have to run super bike. And, essentially, said, send me a list of what's done to it and I'll make it work, kind of thing. And he's like, you're exciting. That I remember that's what he said. Like,
right.
You're exciting.
So you made a name for yourself your first real race out.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so showed up at the first national, same thing. Driving away with it, leading
the first national
amateur
race.
Superbike. Yeah,
okay.
At iCar.
Okay, yeah. Amateur Superbike. Got it. Okay, yeah.
Amateur Superbike rained all weekend. I think race day was like the first dry day. So, and to give people a bit of an insight, like you've been to iCar, you've driven there. This is an old airport, so it's all concrete sections. Some might have shifted height-wise, different than others over the years, and some of the colder winters. And anyway, so just kind of gnarly pavement conditions, but then also steel Armco.
Yeah. Not ideal. Not safe.
And like going through turn one, it's like turn one wasn't a curb. It was just like paint. And then it was a right-hander and you flip it left and you stay on the gas till elbow hits the steel Armco. And then that's when you get on the brakes to turn in for turn three. And we don't go there anymore. I don't think the series has gone there since. Because, I think some people maybe realized, maybe with some unfortunate crashes and stuff that have happened there over the years. But I think some people realized this is not really safe. But again, coming from karting, when so much your, race, that shifter kart stuff was all street races.
Yep.
It's hay bales and you're buzzing your side pods, you're dinging stuff and just, you're pushing the limits, right?
Every lap.
Yeah. Yep. So it's like that to me was like, oh, I'm home. Like I'm I'm doing it. It's like, people, Isle of Man is crazy. You know what I mean? You got to respect that stuff. But it's like, there's some people talk to, like, I would never do that. And like, for me, it's like, I'm probably past that age or point of it being a possibility, but that would be a life dream just to compete in that race. You know what I mean? Because it's just so hardcore, right? But
just explain a little bit what Isle of Man is.
Well, the Isle of Man, I think it's like the longest running motorcycle race, and essentially it's an island, in between Ireland and Great Britain, and every year they hold multiple races on it, but like the big one, the TT, like essentially the whole island closes down, and I think it's like it's 6 laps, and it's not head-to-head race.
Yep.
It's like, you stagger, say 10-second intervals. And so essentially you're running against the clock. Although, you do see guys, they end up racing each other, right? Again, 10-second intervals. And I don't know how many people start or qualify the race, but anyways, it's just the average speed is insane. And just think of like, people kind of in the GTA, especially bike guys, it's like they go up to Forks of the Credit.
Yep.
And they run that little 4-kilometer stretch, and it's, you just wish there were more roads like that. Well, think of doing that full pin as fast as you could go, for hours.
Yeah. And no safety. It's just the streets.
Yeah. It's it's kind of like rally racing. The rider or driver fatalities and the spectator ones too are pretty staggering, but
like every year,
essentially
they're killing someone there.
And that's one of the places too. They do sidecars there. It's like multiple classes. It's just, again, it's hardcore, and that's that's the appeal to me, right? So
So you think, and to say it not eloquently, like you've got the balls factor is like, okay, I can push it. The other guy maybe isn't going to push it as hard. That's where I'm going to excel.
Yeah, like it kind of comes down to that. And that's actually, some feedback I've kind of got through a lot of my bike career is that, like, I don't have the fear to twist the throttle, and
clearly from your first race.
Yeah. And, and I've also heard too, it's a lot easier to slow someone down than it is to speed them up. So it's a good thing. But like I said, there's been a steep learning curve potentially on my end because of it. But like, hey, that's, again, sink or swim, right? It all goes back to that. So,
right. So at iCar, you go out and you put it on the pole and you're leading the race because it's so gnarly.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I qualified pole. I qualified in the front row, but I was leading the race, pulling away. Same thing as the regional, just riding 110%. And again, like, I'm making 100 wheel horsepower. I think amateur superbike at the time was 180 was your maximum. So
you're way underpowered.
Way underpowered.
And you're riding hard.
Yeah, so I'm making up for it. And again, this is my 5th time, factoring in track days and the couple races I had done. This is my 5th or 6th time riding a motorcycle, and I'm doing it at the front. So again, like I said, I'm learning, right, as it goes. And it's like, okay, my head is sliding across the pavement. That's learning, right? So that's what happened at that one. And
big wreck?
I picked it back up. I remember I broke the clutch lever off. I picked it back up and bump started the bike, and I think I ended up finishing 5th. Like, I had pulled a decent gap that even after that, was still kind of in the mix, right? So, I think the next race was at Shannonville, and I remember it was a double header, qualified pole, and I remember someone protesting me, saying my bike was like I was cheating, and then I was explaining earlier with our series, there's maximum horsepower limits, which are essentially to keep the price tag down of the bike builder, whatnot, in the end, but keep it fair, and so my bike went on the dyno, and it was just that guy. That guy's unit, I think, shriveled a little bit because he was on a super bike.
Yeah.
And I think he had about 80 horsepower more than me.
Yeah.
And, anyways, so
that's good.
So yeah.
You're you're doing all these races and you're learning now on the national stage. Yeah. You're learning on the national stage.
Yeah. And when you say learning, I'm thinking crashing, but they're the same thing.
Well, that's what I was getting to. Is how much are you crashing, and how is that perceived kind of in the pits?
Well, yeah, it was always, you always have people that you'd never met before, but you kind of seen up on the pro grid or whatnot, be like, hey, you're fast, kid, but you got to keep it up. It's like, oh, thanks, tips, but okay, I'll try next time, right? So
yeah, I wasn't trying to crash.
Yeah, so I think after that second Shenandoah round, it was took a little bit of step back. I think I smashed my hand really, really good in one high side, and was like, hey, I'm riding over my head. This is a big uphill battle. Partially, like I said, I'm learning at this stage, or at this level in the sport. So I may not necessarily I got ahead of myself, but like doing it combined with a bike that is an uphill battle. Let's kind of regroup. So the next year I bought 1,000. Hey, let's be smart. Go,
may as well go super bike racing.
Go the big one, right? Yeah. So, I'm like, hey, I'm racing super bike anyways. Might as well bring a super bike.
Yeah.
So, 2012, show up. First race was at Shanville with a super bike, rain race. I think I won by 12 seconds.
Okay.
And we had 6 national rounds that year. I podiumed all 6 rounds and won the national championship.
Right. So this is an amateur
super bike. Yeah.
And you're like, well, it's time for pro.
Pretty much, yeah. I think, it's, I'm sure there's a rule written that, if you win the amateur championship, you move up. But it's a bit of a, if you're a top 3, consistent guy, like typically you move up. And you want it, right? It's, for me, looking back at it then, like amateur to pro, there's a big time difference. Like, winning a race in amateur, was 12th, 15th place pro.
Sure.
And that's like one lap, right?
Yeah.
You got to string together a bunch. It's a long race, and pro races are much longer too, right?
Mm.
So, but yeah, kind of jumped up and kind of figured like, hey, you go ride with the big boys. It's you got to make it work, right? It's not gonna, not gonna get to that pace overnight, but that's where I want to be, right? And probably why I never really like entertained riding the 600. Because, from a arrogant standpoint, it's like I wanted to be part of the big show, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, if I'm going to, as a spectator, if you're
going to watch one, it's going to be the super bikes.
It's going to be the big one, yeah. It's like you watch 250 Supercross, it's good racing, but you want to see who won the 450, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, kind of jumped into that and again, learned a bit of the hard way.
Okay.
Definitely has some scars to show from that first year, but
were you, and like, from hearing from the outside, you have this reputation, and it's like, okay, this guy's fast, but he's wrecking bikes.
Well, I don't think it helped that I showed up pro. Like, again, I was new to the motorcycle racing scene. But
sure.
When I thought or think of motorcycle racing, you think of the Umbrella Girls.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to the show than just the racing, right?
Right.
And so...
And you enjoy that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, why not, right? Especially, at that age, 25, 26, okay. It's, I'm living my best life, and
yeah.
Why not, right? So I think it probably, added fuel to the fire with the reputation. When my first, pro race, I had Umbrella Girls and had a mohawk, and half my head was dyed black and half was dyed fire engine red.
Okay.
Which I thought I rocked pretty good, but it definitely, people are like, who the fuck is this guy?
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you wanted to show up and make a statement.
Yeah. And it's ideally would have made it, on track with some podiums, but hey, first year learning. And like I said, there's, racing as a rider, as a racer, it's like, yeah, my goal is to win, mm-hmm. and or do the best I can. That's what's most important. But again, there's multiple layers to it, right? Like it's it's a fan driven sport, right? So it's, and like I said, when I think of the way I've kind of always approached stuff, especially with the extras, the on track stuff, is like, hey, if I'm a fan, this is what I want.
Yep.
This is why I'm going. This is why I'm buying the ticket to the show. This is why I'm buying the ticket to the race, right? So it's like, hey, if I can bring multiple aspects, and again, going way back to the top level car stuff, it's like all that was there, right? You're at the big show. So it's like, hey, I'm just a little piece of this, and I'm new to it, but I'm still going to do my best. And definitely that time, like this, 2013 or into 2014, my second year pro, it's like, the world has changed.
When we were little, we had umbrella girls at go-kart races. Yeah. As a kid.
Yes. So like that,
so the world certainly had changed.
Yeah. And I guess for me, in my eyes, it's I was still keeping it the way it was, right? Okay. Keeping it old school in that sense. But yeah, so yeah.
So were there complaints about the umbrella girls, and where did you find the umbrella girls?
I think that if there was complaints, there was just some other racers' wives. Oh. That sounds like a dick thing to say, but it's probably the truth. Actually, I know it's the truth. I had some people not like me because of it. But again, it's like, again, Me Too movement, it's, there's been so many things brought to, looked at from a different perspective than they had been years ago. But, I didn't then and don't look at it now as, I wasn't demoralizing anyone. Like I said, it was a reality. It's an adrenaline in a big way, male-driven sport. And it's like, well, hey, if I'm, like I said, at the time, I'm a guy, I want to go see bike race, I want to go see hot chicks. Hey, if I'm the dude racing the bike and, they're looking at the chick too, and hey, it's got my logo on their shirt or on their booty shorts, why not, right? So
or on their booty
they're going to come over for the poster, guaranteed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Even if they're not
so
there
it's for the sponsors.
Yes. Did I mention I was the title sponsor? Yeah.
So you're, and let me, I guess, back up, when did you start your own shop? Is it because you got so deep into the racing, you're like, I'm all in?
No, it kind of, like time-wise coincided.
Okay.
That, like I said, I worked at that custom shop for a little bit over a year and kind of decided I want to be my own boss. And that definitely allowed me the freedom to close up shop and load up the truck and go to the track, right? So yeah, I was new to being a business owner, new to being a bike racer. Okay. So it was learning in a bunch of ways. But I was fortunate in that sense that, like I said, obviously there's lots of responsibility on either side of it, but gave myself that opportunity to be able to kind of chase this dream and again, motorsports as a whole, but obviously the bike industry is pretty tight. So, if people know me as a racer, if they know me as now as a fabricator or bike builder, it's, as long as they know me, that's what's important, right? So if you attack it from multiple sides and that's one thing I guess I'm fortunate is like, now it's like, whether I'm working on my race bike or I'm working on a customer project or something, it's like, my head is on two wheels every day, right? So it's the fuel feeds both sides of it. So
right. So if we jump back to the timeline there, you're now like full on. You've got the umbrella girls on the grid. You're racing. You're racing pro. Your company is on the bike.
Yeah.
You're fully invested, and you're trying hard now. You want to do well, and you're still learning as far as crashing and whatnot. Did you give me your injury list? Like how hurt did you get?
Yeah, well, I think,
in that process.
Surprisingly, I didn't have too many injuries pre-motorcycle racing. Like for growing up as a kid, messing around in the backyard, doing stuff I shouldn't have done. It's pretty good. I actually learned how to walk with a broken leg, in a cast. Thank you to my middle brother, Jeff, who pushed me down the stairs. I'm sure I deserved it. But anyways, from that to my early 20s, didn't really have many injuries. Right. And actually broke my right scaphoid, right wrist, first time on a dirt bike. Probably had a couple of concussions on a dirt bike. Probably wearing the same helmet from concussion.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Not knowing any better at the time.
Yep. Totally.
And then got into the bike racing and like I said, had some scrapes and bruises those first couple of years, but again, didn't skirted kind of anything big. And I want to say 2014 was the first big one. So second year pro, went into that season just racing Superbike, podiumed at the first round.
Wow.
There by myself. Yeah.
And you showed up to the race by yourself.
Yeah. So that's I, again, kind of was my own team.
Yeah.
And always had lots of people kind of offering to help and wanting to help, and giving support. And, but yeah, it was kind of small fry at the time. And again, kind of budgets, you know what I mean? Trying to go through a race weekend and be able to afford it. It's like, personnel, and that's definitely the direction things have gone. It's like people can be the most expensive thing, right? But they're the most important thing to that success. And that's definitely probably one of the biggest things I've learned, from that, jumping into pro, having some success, and then that progression from there to the last, couple percent of winning races is those other details and people, right? But yeah, so kind of there by myself, coming in qualifying, helmet on, gloves on, putting the bike up, swapping out the rear tire, going back out, setting a lap, doing it. And like I said, had a podium at that first race, had a manufacturer kind of approach me and say, hey, we've supported a couple of guys this year. They're not really panning out how we want it to. Like, is there any chance we can get you on a bike? We'll give you, a contract for the rest of the year and stuff. And it's like, hey, well, that's awesome. But the next race is next weekend. Yeah. And this particular manufacturer, this particular bike was one of the ones that was a little harder to get parts. Not as hard as a Ducati, but
who was it?
It was a Honda.
Okay, yeah.
But this stuff was not niche, but you wanted the Japanese stuff. You wanted the
good
real
stuff.
Yeah. If not, it wasn't really worth having, right? So
right.
So the only way to kind of make this work was to approach someone who already had built bikes. Who there's a little bit more to the story. I did try one of these bikes my amateur year, and it wasn't the bike's fault, but things didn't really work out. And anyway, so got this call. I know this guy's got the bikes. I'm like, well, you can't make the same mistakes twice. And, I'll give this guy another chance. And it's like, so we show up at the next race, and, and he's like, well, hey, I got a 600 too, so you might as well race both classes. Okay, awesome.
So he's got the two Hondas, and Honda's like, okay, we're going to support you now and think it's a good deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, again, first race, it's like I had no... I got my check for the third place on the podium, but I didn't have, contingency or support. If I was buying parts for my bike, I was going to the dealer and paying full pop.
Yeah.
Where this, like I said, kind of enabled a little bit of support. And if I did well, it came back to me a little bit or helped cover some of the costs, right? So, so you think, okay, I'm didn't make it in Canadian racing, but it's like, hey, I've got something here.
Yeah, totally.
And no, it didn't get easier from there. I did a couple races, and unfortunately, like I said, it was similar to the previous year that there was just, little mistakes. But when bolts fall out of suspension components and stuff like that, or the front axle's not tight, or these are important parts on anything, not to mention a race bike, right? So, I got sent pretty hard. Mosport, was the last race that year. I was third in the Superbike Championship, and like I said, although I did not race the first sport bike race, because that deal didn't come together till after that, I'd had a couple podiums and actually my first pro national race win on a sport bike throughout that season. And some of the guys, who had won the first and second race had crashed out of a race. So we leveled out, and going to the Mosport, I think there was 4 of us within 15 points. And if a position on track is 5 points in a race, double header race, like, hey, we're in the champ, like, we got a shot at this, right?
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't really my main focus. And lo and behold, going into Mosport turn 4 on a 600, you're rocking in there. You're a little bit over, I'd say you're probably high 180s into the 190s on a 600. You're probably 210, 220 on a Superbike.
Yeah.
And it's, kind of somewhat off camber, blind, turning down in, and you really need to hit your mark on the bike.
Or you're in the forest.
Yes. So the bike ended up in the forest. So, I'll just fast track through the details. I ended up in the hay bales, and it had rained really hard that week, so the hay bales were like hitting the concrete, and I got stuck under the bike because I tried saving it. Like I tucked the front. Tucked the front, and it was the type of thing I gotta like drop my shoulder and stay in it if I got any chance of saving it, and didn't save it and ended up under the bike. So hand under the handlebar,
just scraping away.
And when I hit those hay bales, I was out. Like I was out pretty good. And so that was, like I said, that's the start of the big injuries, I'd say.
So
big crashes.
You're unconscious.
Yeah.
For
a while. Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember when I came to, I was already in the medical facility at Mosport, which was the old tower, which isn't there anymore, the old Castrol Tower. And I remember me putting my head up to look at them cutting my gloves off, and like someone pushing my head down and be like, "You don't want to see this." And it was because like the bones were all sticking out of my finger and stuff like that.
Jesus.
And I just remember like I had a bunch of burns up the back of my neck because this bike like was a undertail muffler, so the muffler's under the seat. And when I went into the hay bales, the muffler was up in between my helmet and my suit. So I was burnt again. Had been out for a long time. Whatever. I remember leaving Bowmanville Hospital in like the gown and essentially like checking myself out. Just like, I'm leaving. I don't know where I'm assuming I showed up here in an ambulance with no clothes, so I'm just going to leave with the clothes you gave me kind of thing. And I just remember when I came, like when I was at the hospital and they couldn't give me any morphine. Like I remember the paramedics weren't like certified for certain level of anesthetics.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly how it works, but they couldn't give me any painkillers, long story short.
At the track?
From the track to...
They couldn't give you a Tylenol or something?
No. And actually, so we went to Oshawa, not Bowmanville. So it was even further because I guess they didn't do plastic surgery or something. And again, with the way my hand was.
Show the camera.
At Bowmanville.
Is that from the first? Is that more?
No, these two, so it's like, just to give you an example, that's a normal length pinky. And that's how this one ended up after this. So again, handlebar stuck under, took about a third of that, top of that finger off. And
so this is a theme with motorcycle racers.
Yeah, trying to save it when you should let go. But anyways, I remember they finally gave me morphine because they had to do x-rays because I guess they, when I got to the hospital and they could, administer painkillers of some sort because I'd had this huge head injury, this huge head impact. They weren't sure if I had, spinal damage and if there was surgery required. I guess, they couldn't administer that stuff till after. So anyway, so finally they gave me some morphine. Again, they're picking stuff out of my finger. The bones are all sticking out. And I just remember the lady, the nurse being like, "Oh, where's your phone? I'll take a picture." And I'm like, I don't even know what my name is right now. Not to mention where my phone is. Like, I just remember like kind of rolling my eyes, like, or thinking like, are you new? Like,
yeah.
Did you read the sheet over there? Like, anyway, so like I said, kind of check myself out of there. Set an alarm on my phone for every couple hours that night. Make sure like
you knew enough to try and wake yourself up.
Yeah. Well, I think, and again, like, these, physical injuries, for the most part, you can heal from head stuff.
Got to take pretty seriously.
Yeah. And so again, this is 2014, late 2014. Like this is pre Will Smith concussion movie, pre Sidney Crosby. To be honest, I think like
right around that time, maybe.
It was before like it was
everyone
like,
was
really
aware.
starting to get looked at, right? So, I guess for my benefit, for the next day, because I waltz into the medical office the next morning or registration or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, you can't race." And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm good to race." And I got really lucky in that the what would you call him? Like the head steward of the race was this. He still is. His name's Andre, and been with the series forever. And the very first race, that iCar race, him and I had a bit of a running in, and it was like, you can't do this. It's like, fuck you, I can do it. I can do whatever I want kind of thing, right? Like, I'm the guy with the red hair. But anyway, so it was like, again, years later, I guess when I came to and they cut my helmet off, he was there, and I guess he had said, like, what's my name? And I said, Andre. And then so the next morning I go into medical, like, no, you were out for a long time. And he comes, he's like, no, he knew my name. He was okay. I'm like, I love you, man. I love you, man. And it's like, I'm sure I, heard his accent or something like that. I was probably like, fucking Andre.
Yeah.
And then, but then it's like, hey, so they cleared me to race.
Okay.
And again, it's like, hey, this is Saturday morning. We got a full event.
And
Saturday
like, what do you cast it up? Like,
no,
what?
so I took a bunch of like rubber gloves, latex gloves, and I cut like these 3 fingers off, and I bought like a bunch of that numbing polysporin.
Okay.
And, again, I'm not going to say 24 hours later there's still a bunch of adrenaline going, but I'm about to go ride a bike, so it's still going. And I just like coated my fingers, put the glove over that, and then had a bunch of friends or whatever like help me get it into like my race glove. And then it was kind of, it's like, it's still permanently just along for the ride. But, and then lo and behold, the Saturday it's raining. So rain race. So like you need the most control, the most function. You need to be sharp. I was not.
Oh, this is the Sunday.
This
right?
is the Saturday.
Oh, the Saturday.
Yeah,
okay.
So the qualifying, the big crash was on the Friday.
Oh, okay.
This
Got
is
it.
Saturday.
Yeah.
So
okay.
kind of skated through that. I think I got a top 5 in sport bike, and I crashed in super bike, but picked it up and still finished 7th. So still got some points. And anyways, the next day, dry race and podium super bike, and I think finished 4th in sport bike, same thing. So like was a crazy weekend, you know what I mean? And one of those like, I can brush it off, you know what I mean? When I kind of walked away from that one, or it's didn't really, obviously was disfigured permanently per se or whatnot, right? But and for someone who welds and you know what I mean, works my hands, it was not so much like, hey, it's hard to ride a bike now. It's like, how am I going to go back and work, right? But that's what duct tape's for, I guess. But so like that's kind of was the big first one, and again, I ended up 2nd in the Pro Superbike Championship in Canada that year, which was my 2nd year in Pro, which was, for me, I was like, oh yeah, there's only one more place I got to go now.
Yeah,
that'll be next year. So it happened pretty quick. But that winter kind of got some more support. Got Suzuki came on board for the next year. Had some equipment suppliers come on board, which was necessary. Yeah. And, I'd never really trained up to that point.
Okay.
Never really was a gym guy. Never really kind of had the time for it between work or stuff. But, at that age, like I said, you can bounce and shake it off, right?
Yeah.
And, I went to one of the winter motorcycle shows, and it's like no one gave a shit who I was or no one knew my name. And it, like, burned me.
Okay.
And I was just like, it made me put my head down even more. I wanted to win, and it made me want...
Because they'd know who the guy who won was.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so... Anyway, so I worked really, really hard, did a CrossFit program actually 3 days a week. And like, there was the soccer moms or the MILFs were in there. And, and they're,
So you enjoyed it?
They're wearing their I Love Burpees socks, 2 burpees in. They're drinking their Starbucks cup, like, not pushing it, right? But anyway, long story short, I pushed really, really hard.
Yeah.
And was ready to go for the start of the 2015 season. Had current new bikes, like I said, some awesome support. Put a couple of guys together to help make it happen from a crew perspective. And like I said, I was ready to go. So had a test the week before the opening round, which is at Calabogie, which was a place I never raced at. Had been to once for a track day in a car about 10 years before that.
Yeah.
But anyways, show up there, I think 2nd lap on track, get clipped. There's track days, so there's guys out on street bikes and stuff. Like there's 3, level groups kind of thing. But even in the fast group, there's fast riders from one perspective, but the difference from that to a pro is a bit of a difference. And I think I was passing a guy around the outside in a 4th gear turn, and I think, looking back at it, I think I probably spooked him a bit, and he clipped my foot peg and high-sided me about 220 kilometers an hour, and all that work out the window.
All winter.
Yeah. So, and that, like, I got another concussion, which it was a big hit. and it was a much shorter concussion. But like I said, that
You
first,
mean like you were out for shorter, or like you were throwing up for fewer days?
no, I don't think. I think there's only been a couple of concussions I've had that, resulted in me leaning over a fence throwing up. Like some, again, that first one at Autosport, that was like upwards of 14 minutes. I was told I was out. Like that was a big one.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna say I was all there the next day, but was pretty good. Like looking back at it, like I said, it's people would think it would be unsafe that I raced, but I can honestly say I was good. This one, even though it was like a 4 or 5 minute concussion, which is still really big, it was probably because it was, say, 6 months after this other one. It was kind of snowballing.
They compound.
Yeah, it was compounding. Yeah. And so that was kind of difficult, but what made it worse is I broke both hands and both wrists. I broke both scaphoids and I broke bones in the back of both my hands.
Oh, my goodness.
And again, all this work, wrote like second lap out on this gorgeous bike that I just got and built. It's roasted. I remember like waking up and the visor's ripped off the helmet. I'm in the gravel trap and opening my eyes and I could see the gas tank. I could see most of the bike and I could see like the front end of the bike in 3 different places. And I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. Yeah. And I figured that was the safest bet. But yeah, so yeah, it's that was tough. And again, like, I saw a hand specialist and got, clearance, I guess you'd say, that I was able to ride a motorcycle and showed up the next weekend for the opening round.
The next weekend,
yeah. This happened on a Saturday.
Totally busted hands.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in half cast, and I remember loading the bike into, like, I had a Q van at the time as a race rig, and, like, having to park it on a hill so the ramp was almost straight, so I didn't have, because I couldn't push it up. Anyway, so get there.
So, like, hang on, this isn't helping, like, your reputation at
probably not
in these race weekends, showing up like this.
Probably not. Yeah, I think I'm normal, but I guess saying this stuff for hearing me say it, I guess if people think I'm fucked, it makes sense, maybe. But yeah. So like I said, hey, duct tape. I need to weld some stuff that week. Just duct tape the TIG torch to it and keep going. Right? It's like you just keep looking for it. Right? If there's obviously some stuff that holds you back, but and maybe looking back at it, I could have made better decisions and. Maybe not been in the crash in the first place, but maybe, again, looking back at it, like, maybe I was the Ironman being there a week later and racing all fucked up, but, it took a few years to be able to get my hands to move. It took a surgery a couple of years later to not get myself back to, square one, but, like, get myself able to ride a bike without discomfort kind of thing, and have some mobility.
So were you like in pain that next weekend, like in pain all season?
Yeah.
In your hands?
Yeah, probably obviously more the next weekend. I was still really swollen. I had to get triple XL gloves to get my hands into the next weekend. And I think I actually got my hands frozen before the race.
Yeah.
And I remember, the doctor, he wasn't necessarily the track doctor, but he was a racer, but a doctor himself. And,
okay.
And he's really known. And I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to get him into trouble. But
now you can completely trash him.
No, like hardcore. Like I think appreciated the fact that I was trying, kind of thing. And was trying to help. And he pretty much said, like, how much do you want to feel?
Okay.
And but also warned me. It's like everything you don't feel now, everything like you're gonna put your hands through 6 hours from now when the freezing comes out of it, you're gonna feel it tenfold, right?
Right.
So, anyway, so yeah, froze my hands, and it was like, start the race, and it's like you're coming out of a turn, and you start turning, you don't know, like mentally, you're turning your wrist, turning the gas, but you can't actually feel it. And then it was like, oh, you get kicked out of the bike, or like, ass off the seat, and it's like, okay, too much. Okay, so it was a little seat of your pants, but made it through.
Yeah,
wasn't the smoothest of races, but I think I still got a top 10, which. Out of, say, 30 guys on the grid was, hey, I got points. That's the way I looked at it. On to the next one, right? And, but yeah, that season was a little uphill. I don't think there were any more big accidents and nothing to that level the rest of the year. But yeah, so that was kind of 2 back-to-back, hands and head in one. 2018, I put a foot peg through my right knee, motocross riding actually. Like in between my knee and my kneecap.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And yeah, and that was shitty. But my stubbornness, I was actually in Saskatchewan with Brett McCormick, who Canadian Race World Superbike, won the Canadian Championship a couple times. And anyways, we became really good friends, and he was doing like an internship or like his some schooling here in Ontario. And when he was here for a few months, we rode moto a bunch. And, it was always like, oh, you got to come ride some of the tracks in Saskatchewan. So a couple of years later, we put it together, go out there. And, 3 day, every day we're going to ride moto at a different place. Well, second day, I don't know, 10 minutes in, do I not eat it big time? And I'm like, oh, I'll walk it off. I'll be fine, Anyways, it was not fine. And I flew home a couple days later.
Did you keep riding?
Oh, no.
Okay. It was bad.
It was like, yeah, they kept riding a little bit. And I'm like, oh, I'll just go back to the truck. I'll be fine. And then I remember Brett kind of coming around, and I was just taking like my moto pants off and the knee guard, because I wasn't wearing a knee guard at the time. And you could see like the inside. I mean, I remember like him riding by, and I could still kind of almost see the look on his face. And he's kind of looking back with his goggles off, and you just saw his eyes go, oh shit, like, we're going to the hospital. Like, this isn't, we're going to keep riding. No, we're going to the hospital now.
Yeah.
And I think it was a male nurse sewing me up there, and I think we kept him entertained because we were scrolling on Tinder or something there, and he was giving us his opinion of a left or a right. But there's a common theme here. But well, and I'm gonna backtrack a bit. I'm probably gonna make myself sound like an idiot, but so you'd think your priorities after getting your hands busted and whatever is just getting on the track, getting, like I said, getting some points, which really were. But before this, I had actually hired like a guy to come film the event and kind of film the race weekend and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd also hired 2 umbrella girls to come out for the race week and had like their full outfits or whatever. So it's like, you'd think those would maybe be Monday morning, Tuesday, whatever, you get the sign off from the doctor. It's like, okay, definitely wasn't texting these messages, after that, but like those might be the first things on the not necessary to race this weekend list. They were still there. But anyways, fly back from Saskatchewan and thinking, a couple days later, the swelling will go down. I'll be fine. Oh, no, it got worse and worse. And, laying in bed wearing wakeboard shorts or whatever, it's, pretty loose shorts. And a couple days later, it got to the point where the shorts weren't loose anymore on my right leg. And then when my arm started going numb and stuff, it was like, okay, something's not right here. So had a couple friends like come to my place and lift me out of bed, put me on like an office chair, kind of roll me out into one of their vans, bring me to the hospital. I had a staph infection that went septic. And it was like here, like going up in like almost to my heart.
Right.
Essentially. And the doctor, like essentially it was like I'm sitting in the waiting room and this all, like I said, some of it's stubbornness, but it was like, I don't want to waste 30 minutes at the hospital. Fast forward a few days later, I'm there and it's, it was big. I think I was there for 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what do they do for that? Like, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so I had to go in, take my kneecap out, and essentially the infection that built up. It wasn't the damage or impact from the accident itself. It was the motocross track. There was it was in a guy's backyard, and he had goats. And he was. I remember him talking about how he doesn't have to mow it. The goats just eat all the grass.
Right.
So I think some grass that went through the goat, out of the goat, and then onto the track ended up somehow in my knee, and yeah, that's probably how the infection started. But
wow. So you were in like Toronto or Mississauga for 2 weeks?
Mississauga, yeah. And like I said, I was trying to avoid going to the hospital because I didn't want to be there for half an hour, and ended up, leaving there in a wheelchair a few weeks later.
Did you miss any races?
No. So this was a couple weeks after the last race of 2018.
Okay.
So yeah, we kind of
okay. Oh yeah. Season, got it.
Yeah.
So you've got other big crashes?
Yeah. Well, that was a big one. And then I guess the biggest thing I've kind of had since that was kind of multi-stage. 2019 rain race in Shuby, and race started well. I was kind of going backwards and kind of.
And Shuby's, what is it, Nova Scotia?
Nova Scotia.
Okay,
yeah. Just about 45 minutes north of Halifax, an hour north of Halifax, and just crazy track. Really small, like footprint of the track, but lots of elevation. Really old track. Like I'm not 100% sure, but probably built in the 60s. They've done a bunch of repaving the last couple of years, but lots of pavement transitions, really bumpy, pretty gnarly. Like one of the curbs, I think, were originally like stone, like literally stones put in the ground.
Yeah.
And there's one curb up off the back straight, and you drag your knee and you lose your knee slider because the stone that's sticking through the new curb that's still there, they kept the original historic ones. Anyways, high-sided there, smashed my foot, same thing. Pick the bike up, keep going, get some points. Pouring rain, loaded in the truck, like, let's get out of here, right? Bad weekend. And I think I made it to Moncton, so maybe an hour and a half, and my foot is killing me. And again, box fan, bring the cooler up, put my foot in the cooler, drove the rest of the way home like that. Took a few days off at the gym. We had Mossport 2 weeks later, so quick turnaround to the final event of the year. Putting the boot on was a bit sore, but whatever. Didn't think too much of it. A couple of years later, kind of 2020 COVID hit, lots of time to go ride motocross, at private tracks kind of thing, and was at a track, and a good buddy of mine, his name's Sam Gaynor, top motocross rider in Canada. There was this kind of uphill sequence of like two doubles.
Yeah.
And, he shows up 3-4 laps in, quads the thing, just, hits the first one. You can't even see the takeoff for the second one.
Yeah.
And just does it, right? So, he's, oh yeah, click into fourth, hold her wide open, no problem.
So naturally.
Yeah, so it's like, I can do this. So I don't think it was that time, but I think I went back there the next time, and I'm like, I can do this, right? So I tried to do it, but needless to say, I ran out of talent and came up short, and didn't crash per se, but realized I was coming up short and kind of braced myself on the bike. Just just folded my ankle. Like this
just fully cased it.
Yeah, fourth gear, tapped, uphill. Like there's, huge, right? Huge air, and then cased it, and then broke my right ankle. Anyways, go to the hospital, get x-rays, and the guys who's the doctors assessed me. He's like, oh, when did you break this the last time? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you broke this in the last 12 months. And I was like, oh, there was a time at Shuby. Yeah, okay, yeah. But unfortunately, that one I somewhat walked off. This one I did not. I broke my heel bone, which is called a calcaneus, in 3 places, and two of the breaks came together, so there's a whole section out. But it wasn't necessarily displaced, but pretty good break. And saw a specialist, and again, spring 2020 was not really an easy time for anybody, but trying to go to a hospital then was
oh, right.
Yeah. Kind of difficult. So, I saw a specialist, and he's like, oh, we could do surgery, but 3-4 weeks, you'll be 100%. Well, 3-4 weeks, I still couldn't put a shoe on. It was still black and blue, anyway, so it ended up being, it's something that's never been perfect since. And it's through some chiropractic sessions and, inserts in my shoes and stuff has gotten a bit better, but obviously the same thing, anybody, you work with your hands, you use your hands a lot, you use your feet a lot.
Everyone does, yeah.
So yeah, it's, there's been a few, but,
so now, I guess, do you think more, well, I mean, I guess the one step is going to the gym and taking the racing seriously, but now, as far as the rider being such a big part of racing compared to a car, car, you just get strapped in as long as your hands and your feet kind of,
okay, well,
are you thinking?
I'm giving you credit. It's not that easy. I didn't.
No. But I just mean, physically, riding a bike, you're leaning over, your weight matters. 3 pounds heavier. It's a big deal. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Going forward now, are you thinking more about like functionality and longevity? Like, hey, I want to do this for a long time. Like, are you doing anything specifically?
Yeah, well, so when I did my knee, one thing that has come from that is, like I said, I was in a wheelchair for a while, and it was just kind of weird. Like mentally, you think or you don't think, your knee just moves, right? But like I had to like think about moving my knee. So obviously, walking, being mobile, had a whole nother level of recovery. It was something that like with my wrists or whatever, it sucked, you know what I mean? But didn't, the movement came back, or what movement came back, I should say, didn't necessarily have that mental aspect of recovery to it. And so what I did is I bought, or I had a bicycle, and I just put the seat as high as I could get it. Because again, like I was really restricted in movement of my knee. And, drove Huttonville area kind of thing, a little bit north, so a little bit out of the city, no sidewalks, no curbs to go over, less people to run you over. And like I said, put the seat really high, so when I pedaled, it didn't force my knee to bend.
Yep.
And went in and just put in time, and every week or so, every couple of weeks, I'd lower the seat a little bit so I'd get my knee to bend more. And so that really helped with that. And then has definitely like turned into a big part of my training now is cycling. And it's definitely something, there's a physical aspect to it. For me personally, you know yourself, right? Road cycling is you can go to the gym, work out for an hour, and do a bunch of stuff. A lot of road cycling, it's there's a price to pay time. Like an hour on, you can get a really good workout, but for the most part, you're talking 3-4 hours commitments, right?
Yeah.
And it's that commitment that, like I said, there's a physical benefit to it for sure. I think for me personally, like the mental benefit of knowing I put in that time, knowing I put in that effort. And like I do train in other ways. I've got it's a rowing program that I'm part of. A couple other guys I race against, a bunch of motocross guys are. And I use a skier, so it's kind of a stand-up rower. So so I do a mix of that. There's 3 workouts a week with that. And then definitely in the summer, cycling and stuff. But yeah, like some of it, like I said, has become stuff I've grown to enjoy. It probably started as a little bit of a goal to become a better athlete. And then, it's definitely coincided with that, at this age I could bounce and walk it off and less. So it kind of has helped probably maintain some of that mobility and strength. And like, I'll be 37 for this season. Jordan Zoke, who's, like the most winning Canadian Superbike racer, he's just turned 44.
Wow.
And he was injured and unfortunately missed last season. And I say it was unfortunate he wasn't there because, like I say, he's a strong competitor and he's one of the guys I like to beat most because he gets so pissed when I beat him. And I hope you're watching. But it also rewarding in the sense where, like I said, he's so accomplished. So when you beat him, it means something, right? So, but the two of us, oddly enough, maybe a couple other guys too are a little bit older. There's Ben Young, Kenny, yourself, right? You guys are all in your 20s, mid to late 20s, and
no, now we're all. I think we're all 30. I think we've all turned 30 now.
Oh, have you? Okay. Okay. Well, either way, like, I'd not making excuses.
No, all younger guys.
6 or 7 years ago, I said, it was a little bit easier. So, but again, it's I've come to really love and enjoy it. And like I said, there's the obvious physical, benefits. Like it's super physical on a bike. Again, a super bike. You can ride it, but the people can ride it way harder than I can. I'm sure there's a whole nother level at a worldwide level. I've dabbled a little bit. I did one race in Motor America a couple of years ago, which was
on the Superbike.
Yeah, which was an eye opener where the pace is at, but or difference in it. But yeah, like you need that
physical
level. Or if it, like I said, you need to be in a good shape because what you do, you're the only thing on the bike that can move, right? And, you know, you hanging off the side, you even dropping your head over your shoulder, whatever it might be, like little things like that.
Yep.
Have an effect weight-wise, momentum-wise, you know, also, you know, something that's become really predominant in a lot of people's heads just because the MotoGP stuff has gone so aerodynamic with all the wings and stuff is like even some of those physical movements you do make a difference how the bike will turn or on the flip side, like how much drag you're creating, right? Like, you know, little 5-foot jockeys, you know, used to be the way to go, right? Because they're not cutting a big hole in the air. And, you know, I'm not all that big, but I'm definitely not 5 foot. So, you know, you got to be nimble, right?
Yeah.
So,
you got to be cognizant for sure. I mean, I think, you know, maybe it's just my progression of learning about, you know, how to make a race car go faster or whatever, but like, and maybe it coincides, I guess, probably with starting to ride a bicycle a lot is just aero.
Yeah.
You realize how crazy aero is on a bicycle. I had a guy on the podcast, Dylan Johnson. He's professional gravel racer, and he does a YouTube channel, and he does all these awesome calculations where he'll do like aero socks are worth like 5 watts, and then, you know, aero bars over, and he'll calculate it out over the course of a race. It's like 15 minutes. He's like, I'd be stupid not to do this. It's and insane. Then you realize, like, you know, and it directly translates to riding a motorcycle, you know, as far as rider position.
Yeah, we're lucky on a bike that it's like you twist the throttle and the motor's doing the work, right? You take it for granted, but yeah, when you're on the pedals, like I remember when I was getting fitted on my road bike, you know, having my hands kind of up in the controls or like moving them, you know, a half inch up over the top, just like, you know, that little bit it dropped my shoulders. I remember the guy saying, it was like 5 watts or whatever. Yeah. And you're just like, and yeah, it's, you know, there's a group of us, we did a ride from Toronto to Montreal.
I saw it. I follow you on Strava, I think.
Yeah.
I followed along. I was like, oh, I was pretty jealous. It looked really good.
It was a lot of fun. And we're going to do another one this year. Okay. So we might not do that, right? They're talking about doing a route called like the Empire State. It's to New York City. 1,000 K in a week.
Okay. That would be beautiful.
Yeah. I don't know about that one. But I'm up for the challenge, but yeah, a week's hard to commit, but yeah, like that was, you know, getting back to the aero, it's over, you know, you do 3 days of 8 hours straight, essentially. Yep. Give or take a coffee or two, in there behind a guy versus you pushing, you know what I mean?
Insane.
It's a huge difference, right? And that was one of the things, like leading up to that, this summer was really, really busy and a bunch of traveling and stuff and a bunch of stuff with the racing and didn't really get as much time on the pedals as I did last year. Like I think come end of August, I was maybe 1,500 K where you know, last year I was probably 5,000.
Yep.
You know, so when I kind of said, when I heard about this trail, I'm like, I'm doing it. And then it was like, man, I'm going to ride 200 kilometers a day. Well, last year I did 200 kilometers once.
Yep.
And that was like a huge, you know, I'd done a bunch of 100K. It was it was probably a big step from 40 to 60 to 80 to 100 to 120. I think I threw out in like a 175 in there, but was not conditioned. And then did that 200. And then it's like, it was an awesome accomplishment. But then like, again, thinking back to what we did this year, it was like, man, how am I going to do that 3 days in a row? And more. Because I think the final day was like 230 or something like that was what it was showing. It was like, man, you know, and like that. And considering I hadn't put in a ton of seat time, so I kind of put my head down and
suffer through that one a little bit.
Yeah, well, I put my head down for like a month and essentially did, you know, I would live in Ancaster, so just the other side of Hamilton. And then the shop in Streetsville at the time, started cycling back and forth to and from work a bunch, and put in a couple 100K a week. But again, a couple 100K a week versus a couple 100K a day times 3, a whole different, right? So again, like the 3 other guys we rode with were awesome and kind of knew we had the support, right? And the way I looked at it, I was like, hey, we're all ending up at the same hotel or motel or whatever. at the end of the day, worst case scenario, like I don't want to be the guy holding people up. Worst case scenario, if I'm struggling kind of thing, go for it. I'll see you there in an hour kind of thing. Right?
Yeah.
But it worked out awesome that, like I said, that little bit of moving around and kind of through the 3 days, like we, 5 kilometers in the lead, then rotate back or 2x2 or stuff like that. And kind of partway through the last day, we kind of got it good that into a good spot. We all felt comfortable with like, this is the amount of time leading, this amount of recovery time and
right. Okay.
and stuff like that. And it was a blast. And we were like, all 4 of us were pretty strong. I don't think there's, a point that, anyone was really dying. I'd say like, if anything, like, 3 days on a seat that small was a little bit tough on the ass.
I see. Yeah.
But yeah, that, like I said, that whole other aspect of not wearing a bike helmet and the whole other behind the scenes stuff to racing is, like I said, it's rewarding every day, right?
Yeah.
So
now you seem like, and I think you kind of alluded to it, and I find this as well, like mentally after you get off a bike, like a bicycle or like, 2 or 3 hours doing something like that, something I've never really been exposed to much other than when I've been on a bicycle. Like you feel so good and you feel so clear and like so calm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where is your biggest, I guess, outlet for that, in your life? Is it in the shop? Like, do you really just kind of turn off your brain in the shop and really just plug away at stuff and get a release that way? Or now is it the bicycle? Like, I think everyone kind of needs that outlet. Everyone, you seem like a guy with a lot of energy and you need to expend it.
Yeah, I think, like the cycling is one thing, or just training in general is one thing I've found, or a place I found to kind of put that energy. And it's like, yeah, it's not just, it's not just when you unclip and you're done, right? It's there's a lot of grinding, right? Like, there's some downhills, there's some times where it comes easy, there's some times where it sucks. And like, over an hour ride, over a 3-hour ride, you know what I mean? You run into those times, through there, right? So it's using that energy or taking those tough times and pushing through it is one place to expend it. But so that's probably one place. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, I'm kind of fortunate that so many things I do, kind of coincide and gel together. And it's like, yeah, I want to be a pro national superbike race winner. I want to be a pro national superbike champion. Whether it happens or not, who knows, right? But I'm going to put my all into that, just as, other things I do, I put my all into. And yeah, like having a shop, like I build all my race bikes, I do all the prep. I actually build a lot of my own components, which to me, it's like, maybe it's, maybe there's strengths other riders have against me, but, I have an avenue where maybe I can make up for those, build a little bit, lighter bike or yeah, constantly always thinking of like, how can I better myself, better my program. And then it's really cool too. Like that's a whole nother aspect is like the fabrication and, walking around, the facility here at Legendary. It's like seeing some of these old cars, some of these like one-off or like one of three or, hand-built cars. It's such a different, time. So what comes out now? It's like, now it's, go on Amazon, order what you need, right? That and kind of what I love is the one of one and taking a concept, like designing it myself and then like, ordering the materials and then figuring out a way to build it and then improve upon it. Right. And that's like racing, from its inception was like a platform for trial and error and development and bettering. So it's like, I might not be selling a mass amount of stuff, across the world. It might just be, like I said, that 1 or 2 pieces I built for myself, or it might be something that, people through my Instagram, see and want themselves, or it's like, it's, it's easy to get stuck scrolling kind of thing, with social media, but it's also an awesome platform for exposure. And it's really cool. Like I said, mine is kind of multifaceted through my racing and my shop. So it's like, one day I'm building like an artistic table, one day I'm building a titanium subframe. It's a little bit diverse in that sense, but it's really cool the feedback I get, you know, people saying, oh, had no clue how you'd build that, or like, that's really cool, or kind of seeing more that hands-on side of stuff that's a bit of a bygone era, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's a good place to end it. Tell people where they can follow along for this season and follow your whole season here.
Yeah, so for me personally, my Instagram is One Speed Inc., which is kind of the team name and the shop name. So it's like ONE Speed Inc. Like again, Instagram it's so easy to kind of be posting your stuff throughout the day and have people follow along, kind of see a project, you know, from the base materials kind of progress to the end result, right? So that's probably the best place to kind of check out what I'm doing. And you know, obviously leading in the race season, we've got a few months till that starts, but I'm going to be doing a bunch of ice riding. Just registered for the Quebec Ice Riding Championship this week, so I'm really stoked about that, because that's it's a whole nother animal of two-wheeled fun. So that, and then our series too, the Bridgestone Canadian Superbike Championship, it's on TSN.
Yep.
So that's something, I think third week of May is our first race. We've got 5 race weekends, 4 of which are in Ontario, and then we've got the Halifax round. We start at Shannonville, Grand Bend, Halifax, Mosport, and then back at Shannonville.
Nice.
So, yeah, if you're local to any of those areas, come check it out. I think it's csbk.ca, might be .com, probably .ca, for the schedule for that. And, yeah, come check out a race or check it out on TSN. It's exciting shit.
Yeah. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, send it to some friends and give it a 5-star rating. See you next week.